If you grew up in a time when nothing went to waste, when every scrap of Sunday leftovers turned into Monday night dinner, you'll remember the smell of onions browning in bacon grease, or the gentle bubbling of dumplings in leftover chicken broth. Back then, throwing food away wasn't an option, and our grandmothers didn't need cookbooks or measuring spoons. They had iron skillets, an icebox full of leftovers, sharp instincts, and hearts that knew how to stretch a meal with love. Today, we're rediscovering 15 delicious meals Grandma made from leftovers. Grandma would pull every bit of meat from the bones and simmer it into a golden broth all day. Those wide, flat noodles, often rolled out by hand on her floured countertop, would cook slowly in that warm broth until they were perfectly tender. Down south, they'd say if you've never had chicken and noodles, you're not truly Southern. While up in Indiana, Grandma would serve hers right over a mound of creamy mashed potatoes. The result was a meal that could cure anything from a broken heart to a winter cold, and every scoop carried the warmth of home and the promise that everything would be all right. And just when Sunday's roast beef began to look a little tired, Grandma knew exactly what to do and turn them into a hearty beef pot pie. She'd dice it up with carrots, potatoes, maybe some onions that were getting soft, and whatever vegetables in the root cellar. All of this would disappear under a blanket of flaky pastry that she'd roll out with the same wooden pin her mother had used. The whole house would fill with the most incredible aroma as that golden crust baked to perfection. Opening the oven door was like unwrapping the best present you could imagine. Pure, bubbling comfort waiting inside. Sloppy Joes. Leftover ground beef from meatloaf or meatballs found new life in Grandma's famous Sloppy Joes. She'd brown it up with onions, add a splash of ketchup, maybe some Worcestershire sauce if she was feeling fancy. Served on soft hamburger buns with a cold glass of milk, these messy sandwiches brought joy to every child back in the day. The beef mixture would drip down your chin, and somehow that just made them taste even better. Sloppy Joes was simple food that filled both your belly and your heart. Back then, leftover mashed potatoes never stood a chance in Grandma's kitchen. She'd turn them to either a golden pancake or potato cakes that sizzled and popped in her well-seasoned skillet. Sometimes she'd add a beaten egg, maybe some finely chopped onion, always a pinch of salt and pepper. The outside would get crispy and brown while the inside stayed fluffy and warm. Served alongside eggs and bacon, or topped with a dollop of sour cream, these potato treasures turned breakfast into something special. The smell alone would wake up the whole household, drawing everyone to the kitchen like bees to honey. Number 5. Turkey Tetrazzini. Leftover Thanksgiving turkey had at least 3 more uses in Grandma's hands. The most elegant was her turkey tetrazzini, chunks of tender meat folded into creamy sauce with thin spaghetti noodles. Each time you pick the meat with your fork, you're reminded why Thanksgiving dinner was just the beginning of a week-long celebration of beautiful days ahead. Number 6. Frittatas. Grandma never called them frittatas. To her, they were just egg dishes that happened to contain whatever leftover that needed using up. It could be vegetables, bits of meat, or maybe some cheese that was getting a little dry around the edges. She'd whisk it all together with fresh eggs and cook it slowly in her trusty iron pan. The eggs would puff up golden and proud, creating a meal that worked just as well for breakfast as it did for supper. She'd then cut them into wedges and serve them warm. Frittatas are proof that the simplest ingredients or leftovers could become the most satisfying meals. But the eggs from frittatas were not the only leftovers she had new uses for. When the holidays were over, stuffing got its second chance, and they never quite disappeared from Grandma's table. She'd slice it thick and fry those squares in butter until they turned golden and crispy on the outside and soft and savory inside. Sometimes she'd crack a fresh egg right on top, turning leftover dressing into a hearty breakfast that could energize you through the morning. Whether you called it stuffing or dressing, depending on where you grew up, this meal was a perfect blend of sage, celery, and onion. It could make the simplest plate feel like a celebration all over. Back then, a pot of leftover rice never stayed lonely for long in Grandma's kitchen. She'd make rice pudding out of those leftovers by pouring milk, cracking in an egg or two, and adding enough sugar to make it sing. A dash of vanilla and a sprinkle of cinnamon would transform that plain rice into something magical as it simmered on the back burner. My friend's grandma called it arroz con leche, and I remember her recipe was similar to my grandma's. The rice would drink up all that creamy goodness, becoming tender and rich with every stir, and was served warm in her favorite bowls with maybe a few raisins scattered on top. Shepherd's pie. Leftover roast lamb found its perfect partner in Grandma's shepherd's pie. She'd layer the meat with vegetables in her favorite casserole dish, then crown it all with a mountain of creamy mashed potatoes. Those potatoes would get golden peaks and valleys under the broiler, creating a landscape of comfort food that could please and feed a crowd. The first bite would release a steam of savory goodness, a perfect combination of meat and vegetables. Grandma knew how to turn any leftovers into a fresh meal. And when you think the shepherd's pie was delicious, wait till you taste the magic that happens when leftover chicken meets Grandma's rolling pin. She'd lay tender pieces of meat and vegetables in a pool of rich gravy, then tuck them under a blanket of pastry that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The crust would bake to golden perfection, and when you broke through it with your fork, the most incredible aroma would escape. Each bite of this chicken pot pie was like a warm hug from the inside out. Chicken and dumplings. Some of our most treasured memories came from a pot of leftover chicken simmering on Grandma's stove. She'd drop small drops of simple dumpling batter into that bubbling broth, watching them puff up like little clouds. The dumplings would soak up all those wonderful flavors while adding their own soft and tender texture to every plate. Chicken and dumplings was more than a soup. It was the kind of comfort food that could chase away any troubles and remind you that home was wherever Grandma was cooking. Cold meatloaf between two slices of soft white bread might sound simple, but in Grandma's hands, it became something special. And somehow, that meatloaf always tasted even better the next day, when all those flavors had time to come together overnight. She'd spread a little mayonnaise or yellow mustard, maybe add a slice of tomato if they were in season. It became dense, delicious, and the meatloaf held together perfectly, creating sandwiches that were substantial enough for a working man's lunch. She'll wrap them in wax paper and tuck them into a lunch pail. And honestly, these sandwiches carried the taste of home to wherever the day might lead. Friday's fish dinner was put to good use in Saturday's chowder pot. Grandma would simmer those flaky pieces in milk or cream with diced potatoes and onions, creating a soup that was both elegant and comforting. The fish would break apart into tender morsels that seemed to melt on your tongue, while the potatoes added substance and the cream brought everything together in perfect harmony. Fish chowder was served with crackers and maybe a pat of butter, and could warm you from the inside out on the coldest winter days. Bread pudding. Stale bread never met its match until it encountered Grandma's bread pudding recipe. She'd tear those leftover slices of bread into pieces, soak them in a custard mixture sweetened with sugar and vanilla, maybe add some raisins if she had them on hand. The whole thing would bake into something that was part cake, part pudding, and completely wonderful. Bread pudding is a dessert, and proof that the best treats often come from the simplest things. It was served warm with a drizzle of cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Cornbread Croutons. Yesterday's cornbread found glorious new purpose as golden croutons in Grandma's salads and soups. She'd cube that slightly dry cornbread and toast it in butter until each piece became a little nugget of flavor. These weren't your ordinary croutons. They carried the sweet, grainy taste of corn and the richness of real butter. Scattered over fresh greens or floating in a bowl of soup, they added texture and taste that store-bought croutons could never match. Bean soup. The ham bone from Sunday dinner would simmer away in Grandma's soup pot, releasing its smoky essence into a pot of beans and vegetables. She'd add whatever was available: carrots, celery, maybe some leftover potatoes. The result was a soup so rich and satisfying that it could serve as a complete meal. Each bowl was different depending on what needed using up, but they all shared that deep, comforting flavor that only came from slow cooking and patient love. Corn fritters. When summer's sweet corn was getting a little past its prime, or when there were kernels left over from dinner, Grandma knew exactly how to give them new life. She'd scrape those golden kernels into a simple batter with flour, eggs, and just a touch of milk. The hot oil would bubble and dance as she dropped spoonfuls of that corn-studded mixture into her cast-iron skillet. Each fritter would puff up golden and crispy, with sweet corn bursting in every bite. Served warm with a drizzle of honey or maple syrup, these little golden treasures turned leftover corn into something that felt like pure summer sunshine on a plate. Sunday dinner leftovers turned into Monday night dinners. Fried chicken became homemade chicken and noodles. Beef roast became a mixture of chopped meat and vegetables. Meatloaf became sloppy Joe. Each dish carries with it the memory of warm kitchens, loving hands, and the wonderful women who knew that the secret ingredient in every meal was the love they stirred in. We'd love to hear about your grandmother's kitchen magic in the comments below. And if this presentation brought back some memories for you, please do well to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell icon so you won't miss other wonderful videos we have coming up. Until next time, celebrate those nostalgia and keep those memories alive.